Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Social Critic. My name is Sohail Shakeri, and today it is my great pleasure, privilege, honor, and blessing to have with us today the great, legendary David Icke. David Icke has been an inspiration of mine for the last 15 plus years, and he doesn't need an introduction. He's been so inspiring and so uh, consciousness awakening for so many people. He's been truly a pioneer and at the cutting edge of recognizing, the depth of uh, social control that has been permeating our globe. And he's been speaking about it for the last 30 years. And so, especially with this last year that just passed, more and more people are recognizing how true his words have rung. So, David, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Great. All right. Well, I can talk to you for, as I'm sure many of your people interviewing you can, I can speak to you for hours. So I'm sure we're not going to get to all the questions that I have, but I wanted to start with what I feel it has been an area, especially in the mainstream perception of you, that has been long underappreciated, and that is uh, your your depth of awareness and consciousness and spirituality. I feel like when people in the mainstream get exposed to your views, the exposure, and I'm sure this is done consciously by the mainstream media, is that the exposure is done in such a way where people have that immediate repulsion. Like for people who are programmed in the matrix, the things that are said about you are the things that they know would generally repulse people who are still plugged in. And so I want to give a different awareness than what is commonly put in the mainstream. I feel like your awareness, your spirituality, your consciousness is very similar to people who have been doing spiritual work, people who have been doing inner work, people who have been looking to expand their consciousness for years and years. And it's something that I feel is very underappreciated. Like, for example, in your latest book, The Answer, I highly recommend everyone here to get a copy. Um, you start out the book with quotes from the 13th century Persian mystic, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. And and that really struck a chord in my heart because I come from an Iranian background, and Rumi has been an inspiration of mine pretty much my entire life, but especially in my adult life. And it speaks to the depth of love that I feel that you have for humanity. And so I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about that, and just that perception of yours versus what you are really conveying for people.
Well, I can't change the way the media present me. So all I can do is ignore it and just carry on. I mean, enormous numbers of people are looking at my work now, despite 30 years of abuse and ridicule from the mainstream media. So if you keep putting one foot in front of the other and you don't stop to defend yourself, but just keep on moving, then eventually you'll get somewhere. And whether the media promote you in an accurate way or an inaccurate way, you'll still get somewhere. And I think I have shown that. But what you're talking about is the very heart of what I do and where I'm coming from. And as I have observed the spiritual arena, if you like, uh, I see both in the spiritual camp and in the conspiratorial researcher camp uh, that there's a balance missing. Not all the time, but often it's a widely observable imbalance. And that is that the spiritual arena so often does not want to focus on what it calls the negative and the names, dates, places, secret society manipulations of the human family has been going on for thousands of years. And so much of the what I call the 5 sense level of the conspiracy research arena is so focused on names, dates, places, and all that side of it, which I do in detail. But not only that, because you can get so focused on what I call the 5 sense world, the perceived 5 sense world, that you can see the problem, at least on that level, but you can't see a solution except 5 sense solutions, like stockpiling weapons, fighting the enemy, whatever. And for me, and this is what I've been doing all along, all these decades, is bringing the two together. Because one without the other, like I say, is a massive imbalance, I think. So you get the spiritual arena, and it says that people must become more expanded in their consciousness. Okay, well, I'm all in there pushing against an open door. But you know, when I hear these phrases from that area, people must wake up. Well, my question is, and I'd like to hear it asked more, is why haven't people woken up? Why are people so focused in the material world of the 5 senses? Why is that? And it's no good saying you can't, you mustn't look at the negative, because what is negative? Knowledge is never negative. It's how you use knowledge that can be positive or negative, but knowledge itself is not negative. It's just knowledge. And if we're going to move in a direction where you're trying to help people come out of the 5 sense prison cell, because that's what it is if you're only focused on that level of awareness, then we surely have to look at where the prison cell came from. And then you start to pull it together. You have the spiritual arena saying, or the more advanced part of it saying that this reality is illusory and what we really are is consciousness and all that stuff. Yeah. But you can use that knowledge in a good way or a very manipulative way. Because this knowledge, understanding of reality, how we interact with it, what reality is, what the true I is the means through which we can obviously break out of the 5 sense constant focus. But that knowledge is not only in the gift of people that want to use it in a positive way to help people, become conscious in a much more expanded way. that knowledge is also in the gift of people that want to stop that happening. And we need to understand that you can use what is called occult knowledge, just a word meaning hidden, for very positive reasons and very, very negative reasons. And when you look at the world, we actually live in two worlds. There's the world of the population, and they are strictly limited in the knowledge that they're allowed to, in the course of events, have access to. And if the people in the population want to find out knowledge beyond that, then they have to go and look for it. And in looking for it, they can get a lot of abuse and a lot of ridicule. But over here, symbolically, is another world. And it's a world of secret societies and semi-secret groups, what I call the global cult, that's into Satanism in its most extreme form. And what these secret societies, and that actually have an interlocking leadership, if you go deep enough, what they're doing, I mean, why are they secret societies? Of course, they're keeping secrets. What are those secrets? Well, one body of those secrets is where they want to take humanity so that the population see events every day as if they're random and they're just happening and I don't know where they've come from and, you know, that's happening and that's happening. When actually it's a very clear step by step movement in a particular direction towards total global control. But they don't want the population to know that, so they keep from them that actually there is an agenda, and thus these events are not random, they are stepping stones to an outcome. But crucially in this other world, bringing it back to this old spiritual arena, they hoard the nature of reality, knowledge of the true I, and how we impact on reality and how reality impacts upon us. And they absolutely do not want us to know that, because that's the gateway to out of here in terms of perceptual control. So what they do with the population to keep that out of their understanding is to give them a form of science which is all about materialism. It's all about the five sense world. Can I see it, touch it, taste it, hear it? Okay, it exists then. If I can't, then it doesn't. And it gives people, other people, religions in which instead of talking about the fact that we are all aspects of the same consciousness, we're all points of attention, unique points of attention within an infinite awareness. And therefore, if people want to use the word God, then we are an expression of God. God is an expression of us, this infinite awareness. Instead of that, they break it down into what my father used to call bricks and mortar religion, in which they have a hierarchy. And you have the hierarchy, which is always, as usual, the population, the congregation at the bottom, the deity at the top, and a human hierarchy in between to tell the congregation what the deity wants them to do and think and believe. And all these religious, you know, I mean, there are exceptions, but right. It's interesting that when you break down these different religions, they all operate by that basic same structure. You know, you've got Christianity, and you've got the priests and the bishops between the congregation and the deity. You've got Judaism, where you've got the rabbis, etc., between the congregation and the deity. Islam has a similar thing that you find it in almost every religion. So those structures both of this world is all there is, science, life's a bitch and then you die, 70 years and 10, that's it. And religion, where you are beholding to a perceived God who has power over you and wants to impose his will upon you. And that's combination is designed to hold people in belief systems that disconnect them from what they know, which is that we are points of attention within an infinite expression of awareness, consciousness, and that there is no such thing as death. We're on an eternal journey of exploring forever, infinite possibility. That, you know, when people talk about, you know, something that is all that is, has been, and ever can be, that sounds to the five sense mind to be impossible. How can you be all that is, has been, and ever can be? But what that's describing is all possibility. And that's what we are as an expression of infinite awareness. We have all possibility to manifest, explore, and experience. Now, if you're in that level of understanding that you know your true identity is not your names and your labels in a brief experience called human, but you are the consciousness having those experiences, and that the consciousness that is having the experiences, the true I, is the true you, the infinite eternal I, which ultimately is, like with all of us, is all that is, has been, and ever can be. Then you are not going to be easy to control. You're not going to be easy, especially when there's a few of you over here in this cult and there's billions in the target population. Imagine billions of people that are in that state of awareness of true self and the nature of this reality, that it's basically a narrow band of frequency, which we call visible light, and a bit bigger be the electromagnetic spectrum. And that what the body is doing is focusing the attention of our consciousness in this tiny band of frequencies. And therefore, our main perceptual reality is the world of the five senses. But if you are aware that you are the consciousness having the experience, and that the five sense experience is just an experience, and all the labels that go with it, man, woman, race, religion, sexuality, they're just experiences, brief experiences in a human experience. Then you are almost impossible to control, because you're experiencing this reality, but you are aware of what this reality is. And at this level of awareness, you can see things dot connecting, where the pixels become pictures and you see the patterns, and you see another level of what's actually happening around you in five sense reality. So this cult don't want that. And now we come to the reason why this information has been so suppressed through the ages. I mean, one of my great friends was a Zulu shaman called Credo Mutwa, who died in his 90s last year. And he talked about when the British Empire went into South Africa, in his words, they milked the minds of the shamans and then killed them, because they wanted to know what the shamans knew, this knowledge passed on through the generations, but they didn't want it in circulation anymore, because they wanted to impose upon the people. This is what happened in so much of the British Empire. This world is all there is, science, or the religious structure I've just described. Because what this other world, this global cult, needs to do for mass control is it has to push people into the five senses. It has to get them to focus overwhelmingly on that level, and crucially, to self-identify with the labels of the five sense world. What I call I am ours, I am our man, I am our woman, I am our this sexuality, I am our this religion, I am our this race. And if they can get people to self-identify with the labels as the true I, this is me, then they are locking the target population into exactly what they want and must have for mass control, which is a sense of limitation, a sense of lack of power, a sense of little me, because that, A, is much easier to control, and B, a little me perception will look outside of itself for a big me to guide it. And we call this big me authority. And the authority in the human world of the five senses, isolated five senses, is actually, if you go deep enough, this global cult. And so the two things are fundamentally connected, both in the sense of denying the population the nature of reality and the nature of the true I, imprisons them in the five senses, in a perceptual prison, as a prison of self-identity. But on the other side, that knowledge becoming available is the road to set people free of that control. So while on the face of it, I do a lot of names, dates, places, detailed, if you like, intellect information.
Yep.
People need to know that. But the way out of here, that's really to understand the problem. But the way out of here is for people to awaken to their true self and self-identify with the true I, and that is the worst nightmare of this cult, which is why it works so hard to keep that information from us.
Wow, that was amazing. You that was so eloquent, and such an important. I mean, it's huge. I mean, in a way, I feel like that's everything. Like, looking at what is going on in society, understanding where all the traps are, where the cult has its hands and its tentacles really permeating our society, knowing that they have the goal to keep us imprisoned, and then identifying those so that we can step out of it and identify with that, with the infinite consciousness, as you.
Yeah, because that one of the points is, and this is why the five sense information is so important, is that people will say, well, a few people can't control the world. It's not possible. Well, in 2020, we to present time, we've seen that it is. But so in explaining how it is possible, people open up to the fact that it could be happening, and it is happening, because now they can see how it's possible to do it. And we're back to the same thing. How do a few people control billions and direct the direction of human society? By controlling human perception. That's what it's all about. If one of the things is that you look at the world and it seems so complex. All these things that are happening and everything seems so complex. But actually, it's dead simple. It really is. You look at the different expressions of apparent complexity, and they're all trying to do the same thing. And that is control human perception. Because from human perception comes human behavior. And collective behavior is what we call human society. So if you want to control or dictate the nature of human society, you dictate the nature of human perception. because that you got them then, and you dictate perception by controlling information from which people form their perceptions. So if you look at, I mean, a wonderful example of what's happened since this pandemic hoax was played is that people meekly, mildly went under house arrest last spring, the vast majority, because they perceived that there was a deadly virus because the authorities told them. And so in fear of the deadly virus, having been told by authority that the only real way to protect them from the deadly virus was for them to accept house arrest, billions went under house arrest. You had another group that was questioning what they were being told, but they were intimidated into going under house arrest because they feared the consequences of standing up against it. And those two groups, the first one being by far the biggest in the spring, still is, but not as big, those two perceptional states put billions of people under house arrest on the say-so of a tiny number of representatives of authority. And so you can see all the time the relationship between people's perceptions, not least of self, but of the world as well, and their behavior, which then becomes human society. So this other world, the world of the cult, the secret societies, knows that. So it's working constantly in so many and various ways to program the perceptions of the population, because it knows that if it can do that, that it dictates human society. Because you don't have to externally impose a society, because, as I've said, what we call human society is human behavior, and human behavior is human perception. You just go to stage one. You're targeting perception, because everything else after that plays out as a matter of course, as a cause and effect. So you look at the education system. It's not an education system at all. It's a programming system that's all the way through the formative years. Children and young people are being programmed with perceptions. The media, you talked about the media earlier, it's not journalism. They're repeating the official version and attacking anyone that challenges the official version, because the media is programming the perceptions of the population. And I've worked in journalism. I was a professional journalist for a long time in newspapers, radio, and television. And I can tell you that the vast majority of journalists are telling the official story because their career depends upon it. And most of them don't even realize what's going on. They haven't got a clue. What they do know is that if they keep supporting the party line, especially now, because it's the pressure to do that is, well, you're out the door if you don't, right across almost the entirety of the mainstream media. So they just do what is necessary to pay the mortgage. Sure. And they haven't got, most of them haven't got a clue. Some of them have, and they are knowingly doing it. But the vast majority haven't got a clue what's going on in the world. And all they're doing is repeating the official story because they believe it's true as well. And so you've got all around us, you've got this perceptual programming going on. And if you look at a human life in the way the system's been set up by this cult, from cradle to grave, it's a download of perception. It starts with the parents who, with honorable exceptions, have been through the same system and bought the perception, and they pass it on to their children at the earliest ages and start influencing their perceptions, not because of malevolence, most of the time anyway, but because they think that's the right thing to do. And then within 3 or 4 years, the child is of coming into the world, the child is in a school situation with a representative of the state, telling them, well, I mean, this is when the control starts big time. The child has just come into the world, and now this authority figure representing the state is telling them when they have to be at the school, when they can leave, when they can eat, when they can talk, when they can go to the toilet. And in between, they're telling them what to believe about the world and what to believe about themselves. And this goes on all the way through the education system and then, well, programming system. And you come out the other end and you go into the world of work, the adult world of work, and you're meeting people who've been through the same system you've just left, but earlier. And so what you basically get, because of the program perception, it's like I call it the postage stamp consensus. You know, it's a very narrow band of sense of the possible and belief. And so you go out into the world of work, and generally, with odd exceptions, but generally, people are all seeing the world the way you were told to see it at school. And so perception starts to form on the basis of, well, everyone says it, everyone knows it, so it must be true. And anyone that's challenging it must be wrong because all these people are saying it's true. But they're saying it's true because they've been programmed to believe it's true in the way I've described. And then underpinning this all the way through your life is the media. It's basically repeating what you've been told to believe at school. And you have the government and the councils and the law enforcement, all of it, science, doctors, they're all coming from the same direction, not least because these institutions like science and medicine insist basically that you believe what they want you to believe, otherwise you don't get the funding and you don't get into through the medical school and become a doctor. So it's even when you leave school, you look at the medical profession, which is one way this hoax has been pulled off.
Oh yeah.
Because the medical profession, they know that what they can do in terms of treating people and what they can say is fiercely limited. It's fiercely limited because, again, the medical system is controlled by the big pharmaceutical cartel, big pharma. And so it concentrates on the scalpel and the drug because that's the world of big pharma. That's where it gets its massive, unbelievable profits from. So the medical profession is owned by big pharma. And if doctors don't conform to that limitation and say and do what they're told, then they lose their careers. And people outside of that who've seen that there are alternative ways of healing that are based on what the body is, as opposed to what big pharma wants us to believe it is, which is basically a lump of meat, they get targeted by the system when they're doing alternative ways of treating people. Why? Because if people start to see that these other ways of healing are more effective than the scalpel and the drug, then the scalpel and drug medicine is going to start getting seriously undermined. And I have a friend in Canada who was a mainstream doctor who, in her holidays and time off, traveled the world and started to see that there were other ways of treating illness, disease, disharmony, that worked far better than the big pharma cartel methodology. And so when she came back to her practice in Canada, she started using these techniques because they worked.
Right.
And she got struck off. She also wrote a book exposing the pharmaceutical cartel for the criminal organized crime syndicate that it is. And she was also, obviously, that was part of striking her off. So this is how it works. And today, as we speak, it's never been more obvious and more blatant. This has been going on all along. But now it's so in your face that this is what you believe, this is the narrative, and if you deviate from that narrative, and that narrative's getting narrower all the time, then you're going to be silenced. In every way possible, you are going to be silenced and demonized for that. So you've got people losing their jobs for their opinions, and what's happening in America is extraordinary in terms of the targeting of people, even politicians, for their opinions. But all it is a ramping up of something that's been going on all along, quietly and subtly, more subtly. But the perceptual programming is lifelong, and they want you out at the other end, still not knowing what you need to know to understand the life that you've just had.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and it's something that I feel like, you know, many of us who are seeing the corruption, you know, that's been taking place in, you know, 2020 and going into this year, still I think haven't recognized the breadth of, and something that you have been speaking about for so long, is that this programming has been going on for such a long time. And I feel like it's as if the programming has been happening, and and something has been activated, because the programming's already been in place. Like, for example, with regards to disease and how disease happens, and, you know, the germ theory of, oh, we have to be scared of this virus, and with regards to the media and our perceptions of the government. And it's as if, okay, right, we've got people programmed. And so it all the while here, especially in the Western world, in the Western democracies, you know, people are like, yay, you know, I'm free, everything's great. And then it's like, okay, all right, let's turn up the volume. And, you know, the masks, the social distancing, the, you know, the vaccine and everything. It's as if, like, the way I see it, it's, you know, with the whole masks and everything, it's like we've been wearing masks the whole time, going back prior to 2020. Just in 2020 until now, we're seeing it. It's as if it's like we've had these masks on the whole time, and now in 2020, with the 2020 vision being exposed, we're seeing that we've been suffocated. We've, like you were talking about, our perception has been so limited. Now it's just taking its external form. Now it's just showing itself for what it is. And it's like, oh my gosh, how do we get back to the normal? Well, the normal is not 2019. The normal is what you were talking about, that breadth of perception, that recognizing that infinite consciousness that we are.
Well, I'll tell you a story you probably know, but what we're seeing is an extension, very extreme extension, of what's been happening all along, as you rightly say. And so the word person or persona, if you go back to the Latin origin, means actor's mask, which takes us back to this self-identity with labels. Those labels are the actor's mask. But the actor's mask goes on much deeper, because once you disconnect five sense mind from an influence of expanded awareness, one of the things that happens is people fall into fear, and they fall into basically lost identity. They fragment in their consciousness because they've fragmented in their self-identity. The five sense mind that they self-identify with is only a fragment of their consciousness. And if you look at what's been happening, it's all systematic, because like I say, this other world understands this. That's why it wants us not to understand it. That what we call identity politics, it has many benefits, not least divide and rule, but it's also subdividing the self-identity. It's subdividing the fragmentation. So instead of I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm this religion, I'm this race, whatever, suddenly you have this long list of letters, LGBT and on it goes,
Right.
where people are self-defining themselves and feel the need to in the minutiae of detail. So when you self-identify with the minutiae of detail, this is what I am, and I have to define myself even by the subtle differences that of you. Well, you are taking fragmentation of awareness, consciousness, into a very extreme level, because at that level of awareness and self-identifying, you are all one consciousness. All these different fragmentations called labels and what I call the phantom self, they are all fragmentations of one whole. And what the cult wants to do is to keep us fragmented, because then we're controllable, and then we're able very easily to be kept in ignorance. So you are looking at this systematic fragmentation of consciousness, and each of these fragmentations, these fragments, are given labels to self-identify with. So the answer is to become whole again by realizing that all these different fragments are fragments of the same I. And then you can start to see things you couldn't see before, because at that level of perception, where you are focused on five sense reality alone, the world seems a certain way, and you respond, you feel and act in a certain way, you perceive in a certain way, not least through the lens of limitation. But when you expand your awareness, and how do you expand your awareness? You know, again, we come back to that spiritual arena where, you know, I've been all the way through it all over 30 years and seen most of it. And it's made to seem so often to be so complicated. How do you awaken? How do you awaken to your true self? How do you expand your awareness? And well, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to go to that workshop, this, that, the other, you know, this guru. But for me, it's much simpler than that. It's a redefinition of self-identity. Because when you see yourself in limited terms, label self, phantom self, then your consciousness is limited. What you're accessing of your consciousness is limited because your perception and self-identity is limited, and one is a reflection of the other. So as you redefine your self-identity from I am David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, that's my experience, to I am the expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be, having a brief experience called David Icke, born in Leicester, England in 1952, that self-identity expansion automatically expands you into greater and greater swathes of consciousness, because one is an expression of the other. Our limitations are our sense of limitation. That's all they are. I mean, you know, endless quotes from people through the ages, Buddha, and, well, you know, Rumi, some absolutely magnificent observations from an age before this one. It's a common theme. You define your self-identity in expansive terms, you will automatically open yourself to expansive states of consciousness. And this is what the cult doesn't want, because once you do this, now the dots are not dots anymore. The pixels are not pixels anymore. They're pictures, they're patterns. You can see how they connect. And when you can see how they connect, you see the world in a completely different way, because you know that how you perceived it before was in a way. Well, I would put it like this very simply. Imagine you're standing in front of a wall and you're looking at the wall at close range. So what can you see? Well, I can see it's kind of out of focus red. I don't know what it is. Okay, take a step back. Oh, it's a brick. Okay, so what? Take another step back. Oh, it's a house. Take a few more steps back. Oh, it's a row of houses. A few more steps back. Oh, it's a street. A few more steps back. Oh, it's a city. Oh, it's a planet. Oh, it's a solar system and a universe. And all it is your point of observation. And so symbolically, they want us looking at that brick at close range, because then we're controllable because we know what's going on. People say, what's going on? All I can see is this out of focus red mist. That's how people live their lives.
Wow.
Once you do that, so that's what's going on. And so once you go, so that's what's going on, then you get targeted. In the words of Credo Mutwa, they milk the minds of the shaman. What can you actually see? And then kill them, because they don't want that level of perspective, because it would bring an end to the game.
Amazing. That was a wonderful example. Well, I know we're running out of time. I have so much to ask you. I was telling some of my friends on my channel here, The Social Critic, about interviewing you. I said, I feel like a kid in a candy store. And so yeah, lots I can't get to, but one that I feel is really, really important is one of the things that I've sensed is that the secularism of our society, okay, so we take, here in the West, we take pride in our secular rationality, right? So there's the dogmatism of the religious hierarchies that we recognize are authoritarian and oppressive, but we are free, right? The rationalism of the Descartes, of the John Locke's, and we see that rational thinking, intellectual thinking is like the epitome of human development. And my sense has been, especially in recent years, in my exposure to different spiritual texts and just my own awareness, is that this is part of the play of the cabal, or the cult, if you will, because like you said,
100%.
Because like they know that there's, like you said, milking the mind of the shaman. They know that there are other energies at play, symbolic consciousness. And so they say, okay, let's just strip that away from people. So they think it's all about this physical world, the material. Forget about, oh yeah, religions and everything. Of course, they're oppressive and they lead people to superstition, but we're smart, we're intellectual, we're rational. And it's like, oh good, so they're out of their symbolic consciousness. Now let's bombard them with symbolism and get them controlled, and they don't know what's hitting them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's basically the dynamic. In my book, The Answer, I symbolize the 5 sense mind prison as a bubble. So what they seek to do is to isolate us in 5 sense perception. And having done that, so the influence of expanded awareness is shut down, or to a large extent silenced. And then it takes the isolated bubble of awareness and bombards it with information to program its perception. This through the system that I was talking about earlier, and this word secular and this word rational. In one of the books, I take the sequence round of word meanings, and when you follow the word definitions of rational, which leads to logic, which leads to this, which leads to that, and then it comes back again to rational. It's like a circle, which is very, very symbolic, because the intellect is basically a closed circuit, a closed circle. And when people say, oh, he's got a great mind, well, okay, but has he got an expanded consciousness? Because they're not necessarily the same thing, and often are not. And if you look at academia, you look at science, which is an expression of academia, you look at medicine, another expression of academia in its own way. It is, academia is the world, the perceptual world of the intellect. And the intellect is the village idiot compared with expanded awareness. So I use the...
Rumi talks about that.
Does he? All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, Rumi knew what he was doing. So you look at this difference between intellect and expanded consciousness. Intellect can be clever in the small area that it is perceiving. So it can be clever about the way the various subjects, etc., happen in the five sense world. And people can gather a lot of knowledge about that subject and how it plays out in the five sense world, and that's called cleverness. But what comes from consciousness beyond mind is wisdom. The big picture, which is what wisdom perceives. That's why wisdom sees events, the world, and people in a very different way to cleverness. And so if you look at the world, and I said this in a book way back, it's very easy to see that cleverness without wisdom is the most destructive force on earth. That's because it's this obsession with intellectual cleverness that has taken us to a large extent down this road. Because you see, it's very clever to make an atomic weapon.
Exactly.
But it's not wise to do so. And that's the fundamental difference between the two. And I'll tell you a story I think just really sums up the intellectual level of what's happening, which of course the intellect dominates all the institutions that dictate to society. And behind them is this cult that knows the intellect is the village idiot, but wants its minions and its population in the target population in the intellect, so that they are fragmented, because the intellect again is a fragment of consciousness. It's not expanded awareness in the greater sense. So if you look at Plato and his allegory of the cave, where he was describing, Plato obviously being the ancient Greek philosopher, was taught by Socrates. And funnily enough, Socrates talked about these concepts as well. One of the things that he's quoted as saying is words to the effect of that you can have a well, here's one of his phrases where he talks about the fact that you can see the world in a certain way, in my terms through the mind, but you see it in a much different way when you see it from another level of consciousness. They don't look the same. And he talked about basically wisdom being the understanding that there's always more to know, in the sense of and this is another thing about the intellect, and you see this with intellectuals and academics. They get a belief system and then they defend it from all borders. It's not a movable thing from the perspective of, well, this is what I think I know at this point, but what I know, and this comes back to what Socrates said, I know that there's always more to know. Wisdom, Socrates said, is knowing how little we know, because that always keeps your mind open to other possibilities, because you're always aware that there's always more to know. But what you see is the closed loop of the academic intellect, where this is how it is, and we're not going to open our minds to any other possibility. And that's why changing things in mainstream science is like turning an oil tank around in a river. It's so slow and laborious because of this defense mechanism that the intellect has for what it currently believes. So if we go back to Plato, he talked about the allegory of the cave. And it was basically this, if people haven't come across it. There's prisoners in a cave, and they are chained, and all they can see is one wall of the cave. And behind them, there's a fire, and there's people and animals walking past the fire behind them, but they can't see them. But what these people and animals are doing is casting shadows on the wall. And because that's all that the prisoners could see, that's the reality they believed in. The shadows on the wall, that was reality. And one of the prisoners in the story eventually escaped, realized this wasn't reality at all, came back and told the other prisoners, this is not reality, it's very different. And of course, they attacked him. They didn't believe him. But where I'm going with this in terms of the academic mind is Plato talked in this allegory of the cave about certain of the prisoners who became absolute experts on the shadows on the cave wall. They are the academics and the intellectuals in the human world today. They have a totally skewed perception of reality and a limited perception of reality, but they've become experts on that skewed, limited perception of reality. And they're very clever in that area that they operate in. But they're not wise enough to see that actually that is not a reality. And that generation after generation has kept humanity in ignorance of so much because humanity has this little me sense of insecurity, and it's always looking for a big me. Might be a priest, it might be a god, it might be whatever. They look to these symbols of cleverness, which they're given, these symbols of they know, scientists, doctors, academics, etc.
Pundits on the news.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's who they look to give them a fix on what's happening. Of course, he's a professor, so he must know. Well, actually, if he's a professor, he probably doesn't. Because, you look at these academics and teachers too, of course, there are exceptions. But I mean, in general, you go through the education system, you go through university, still in the education system, programming system, then you go off into academia. And all you've done is changed your position within the same system. So this is why you find academics are some of the most programmed people of all. I left school at 15 I never took a major exam in my life. I left school as early as I could to go and play football, professional football, and it was the greatest thing that could ever happen to me, because I didn't get caught in that system. I at school I thought, nah, this is not for me.
You got out of the programming early.
Yeah, very early. Yeah, and it was a great thing because it's that which, see, I think Einstein said something about this, that the way that you spend your life deprogramming yourself from what the education system has told you to believe. And so many people do, and so many people actually don't even try because they believe what they're told to believe is true. But I was fortunate because I didn't concentrate at school. I mean, when you started the school year and you went into a new series of classrooms for that year, I was always at the front of the queue, well, or near the front, because wherever you sat on that first day in the first class of the new year was where you sat for the whole term and beyond. So I wanted to get at the front because I wanted to get a desk near the window, and I did it again and again and again. So I was always sitting by the window. So when the teacher's going on about stuff, I'm looking out the window. I'm looking at people playing in football in the sports field and stuff, because I just instinctively thought, you know, I don't need to know this, and you know, this idea, and it's all about what we've been discussing, but this idea that you have to put children in formal education at such an early age, and that you have to keep them there until they're well into their teenage years, in fact going off into adulthood, is a nonsense. I've just described, you know, the way that I didn't take the school seriously at all. I just went to school because I could be with my mates and play for the football team. All the rest of it I wasn't really bothered about. But I've done all my learning after I left school. Everybody else can do that. You don't need this period of formal, day after day, tortuous education programming, going from class to class to class, homework, bed, sleep, class, homework, bed, sleep. That's not a childhood, that's a programming operation. And you know, this is another part of the intellect. It's dominated by the left side of the brain. The left side of the brain, which overwhelmingly sees things as apart from everything else, which is why if you're stuck in the left side of the brain and you're an intellectual, very, very difficult to perceive things as all connected, because you're only seeing parts. And the right side of the brain, which is where so much creativity is made manifest, the artist and what have you. If you look at the education system, and this has happened everywhere because I've observed it over the years. These right brain stimulating subjects of art and drama and all these things, they have been suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and suppressed within the education system, and it's all been about left brain subjects and pounding the left brain with information, most of which people are hardly, if ever, going to use in their entire life. I mean, you know, I use the example of algebra.
Oh my, I was just thinking of that. Wow.
Point. You know, if you want to know about algebra, well, learn it. If you have to, you reach a point in your life where for some reason you need to know that. Okay, well, learn it then.
Right.
The idea that you have to go in search of what X means when you're a kid. I mean, what does X mean? I don't care, whatever you want it to mean, you know, whatever makes you happy. It's crazy. But this is what's happening. And the thing is that what is it doing? It's focusing the attention of children and the young on this five sense world, because that's overwhelmingly what these education subjects are all about. And they are denying systematically, because like I say, this world knows this, and therefore it's systematic in what it's doing. They know that if you have playtime, if you have my time, if you have ponder time, then the chances are you're going to start to expand into other perceptions of reality. And you're going to start to tap in to other levels of your consciousness. They don't want that. They want you focused. So they've set up an education system in which you focus at least 5 days a week through the day. You're going from thing to thing to thing, but they're all that. And then they give you homework, because they don't want you to have ponder time outside of the school. So you get the homework, and the older you get, the more homework you get, and the more exams you need to pass. What is an examination? It is testing the state of your programming. What do they give people in education, in university? They give them degrees, the same degrees which the secret societies are broken up into, degrees of knowledge, degrees of programming. And so what they've now added on to that, another addition, this is why, I feel so sorry for young people today. They're the most perceptually targeted generation in human history because of all the technology. Now, where's the ponder time? You are focused in on education all day. You then have your homework, and then the me time is overwhelming, looking at the screen. And what is a little screen except focus? And so they are keeping the five senses stimulated all the time for as much as they can through childhood. And then eventually it becomes just a state. You get locked into them, and thus you start through your life to perceive everything only through them. And your Rumis and people who have seen through this over the centuries, they lived in very different worlds where this focus was not imposed as it is today, so fiercely and constantly and incessantly on the young. But even when I was growing up, I was born in 1952, you had lots of ponder time, because there wasn't, oh yes, there was the classes, yes, there was homework when I could be bothered to do it, but there was still lots of ponder time, which was not
right
taken up with smart devices, which it is now. And so the programming for the young and children today is absolutely incessant, and it's on purpose, because where they want to take the world, they need seriously programmed people to accept it. And therefore, they're targeting the young, because the world they really want will be when they're adults. We're just moving towards it now ever quicker. So, my grandchildren have not gone to school. They're homeschooled, and they're bright as a button. They are intelligent. They are observant of the world. They are very knowledgeable on many things, but they've not sat in a classroom all day, every day, being told what to think. While the sun's shining outside, there's trees to climb, there's things to explore. We put whole generations of children in a seat and telling them they can't move until the authority figure says they can. And that just brings us to another level of this, which is people's reflex action, obeying of authority. If you look at this system that we've just talked about, one element of it is becoming, if not in awe, then at least aware that if you don't obey authority, there are consequences. Mm. So if you don't obey the teacher, or you ask them questions that they don't want to answer because they can't about what they've said, then you're a disruptive influence in the classroom. And if you keep going with it, they'll probably want you on Ritalin or something. But if you obey and you conform, well, you don't get that pushback. So, well, it's much easier to just conform and just go along with it. And then that becomes a reflex action eventually. So when you leave the education system, the teacher becomes the boss. All the way through your life, you've got this authority, these authority figures around you, for which there are consequences of doing what they say and consequences of not doing what they say. And after a while, it becomes a reflex action, acquiescence to authority, because you've been doing it all your life. Wow. And I was fortunate because from a very, very early age, from a very small kid, I thought, why do I have to do what authority says if it doesn't make any sense to me? That's crazy. And if authority wants my respect, then it must earn it. It's not going to get it just because it's authority, whether it's a teacher or whatever. I wasn't going to do that. And so when you come all these decades later, I'm now on my way to 69 in April. It's still the same. So during this lockdown, with the masks and the social distancing and the house arrest, I looked at it, what authority was telling me, and it made no sense. It made no sense. In fact, it made the opposite. And so, as when I was a little kid, I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. It makes no sense to me. Why should I do something that is obviously so bloody stupid and contradictory? So I've not worn a mask. I've not social distanced. If people want to get out of my way and social distance from me, or be my guest, your choice. But I'm not frightened of you, so I'm not going to, dart away from you. And I'm certainly not going to sit in my home and only go out when authority tells me I can. It's not happening.
Right.
And again, that's my perception. And therefore, my behavior reflects that perception. And if people went down that same road, then this fascism that's being imposed on the world would be unenforceable, because there's billions of us, and you'd get the core of this cult in a single room. So, the answer staring us in the face. Fascism does not get introduced by fascists because there's never enough of them. Fascism gets introduced by the population acquiescing to fascism. So all tyrannies come in. Tyrannies aren't imposed, they are acquiesced to. Because the dynamics of the numbers of those imposing them or seeking to, and those acquiescing to them, are so massively different that only by acquiescing to tyranny can tyranny manifest. And that's what we've seen since the turn of 2020. We've seen acquiescence to tyranny, and thus we've had tyranny. Brilliant. Stop it, and then we won't.
Wow, there you have it. Amazing. Thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time, David, and it's been such an honor. And I would love to be able to do this again if, your time and schedule permits. There's just so much that I would love to continue to discuss with you. And I mean, your insights, not just today, but all throughout the years, have been so appreciated. And I, thank you for being such an inspiration to millions and millions around the world.
Well, that's very kind. And, when I get feedback from people and how it's touched their lives, that's the whole point of doing it. It's an honor for me to be able to put this information out and to affect people in a positive way. It's such a joy, and all it is information, knowledge, and from knowledge comes a changed perception. From changed perception comes a changed life. That's why they want to control knowledge. Not while I'm around, they won't.
No, they won't. Thank you so much, David Icke.
With a real pleasure, mate. Thanks very much.
It's been an honor. Appreciate it.
Bye.